Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach and welcome to the weekend preview, coming to you at some stage on the Friday afternoon, which will probably be the more likely time slot that the weekend preview will take place from now on, with my new work starting in a couple of weeks. Had my last shift at Coles last night, which was nice to actually, no more stacking shelves for Shorties moving up in the world, which is nice to see, so hence why it was a little bit later. And we're on the Friday today, and an interesting round of SuperCoach ahead of us. A couple of curveballs thrown at us throughout the selection period, which will have us slightly changing some plans and throwing a few plans out of whack, and potentially, depending on laid outs, etc., could have some sides again really struggling. I'll start with the ins column, and Todd Goldstein has been named, but again there is serious doubts around him. You know, you wouldn't have thought they would risk the big fella. He's very durable and looked as though he's extremely like to return. He's been named again as he was last week, and you're just going to have to sweat on that one for Saturday night, and fingers crossed he is named. And personally, I hope he's not named for the cat's sake. But Tom Lee is also back. He's on the bubble. Now, if you've already got Sam Collins, which I'll talk about later, Tom Lee may be a guy you think about trading to. I know the Saints have a few injuries and things. I'll get into that later. Callum Mills returns. Ben Kennedy is on the extended bench after being best on ground in the VFL. And the outs, well, they're lengthy and quite important. Sam Mitchell is out. Anthony McDonald tipping Wooty is arrested. Jackson Payne, not overly huge one there, but some may have, traded down to him and just been frustrated by what will now be a donut. Tom Cole, likewise. I think he was a late in last week, but again, he's out of the side. Nick Rewald is out. Jacob Hopper is on an extended bench, but should be named. And George Hewitt, of course, was concussed early. He was on 11 points, and he is out of the side. And of course, the big one is Aaron Hall. Gee whiz, I don't think many would have seen this coming. I know a lot of people were thinking about trading him out anyway due to poor form, but I don't think anyone could have seen that he would be dropped. Now, how many injuries do the Gold Coast have? You'd need about 4 or 5 hands just about to count them all. They've absolutely been decimated at times. There's fewer starting to come back now. O'Meara to play in the reserves, but Hall has been dropped now. I know a little bit of it, reading between the lines. Some of it is form, but also I think it's his training habits, disciplines, and just ability to really put in what he was early in the season that had him as Gold Coast best player. Now, do you trade him? Do you keep him? That's the question, and my advice is you keep him. I think we've got far more important things to worry about than getting rid of Aaron Hall. I think he'll be back in the side very soon. Rodney Eade said it himself. He said he's far too good a player. This is paraphrasing. Far too good a player to be out of sight for too long. We've spoken to him. We've outlined what he needs to do to get back to the form that he was in early in the season, and basically he got away from it. So in layman's terms, he's gotten a little bit lazy on the track, maybe thinks it's going to happen, potentially slackened off at training, hence they've dropped him for a bit of a kick in the arse, and that's as simple as it is. He's in their top 10 players, and even an out of form Aaron Hall is in the top 22. I think they're just sending a message to him. He may have been caught up in his own fame and, rise to success. I'm not too sure, but he was great in the early parts of the season and he's really dropped off. But I'd be keeping him just because I think I can still see him coming back into the side very soon, potentially next week, and still finding some really good form, because some of the poor scores in recent times, some have been down to injury. He had a shoulder problem, and some has been down to poor form. I know some people make the argument he hasn't scored 100 for quite some time, but I think Gold Coast has surely passed their very, very worst with a few players coming back, and I think that's coincided with Hall not getting to his best because of injury. But I think once he goes back, gets back to what he needs to be doing, I think we can see him in the back half of the season, playing some good footy. But on a little side note, isn't it interesting how mid prices are just so hard to get right, and how they can just kill you time and time again? You can probably argue the only one, at least in the forward line, is Zach Merritt, who's really worked. I know I did a video early in the pre-season discussing Toby Green, Aaron Hall and Sam Gray. A lot of people were looking at all those three and Merritt and going, gee, we could start 2, maybe 3 of these guys. And you could argue, and you'd be correct in saying that probably all three on that video have not been good picks. Gray, of course, was a horrible pick that I got badly wrong. Green at times has been okay, but he's also been out of the side at times with inconsistent scores. And Hall started like a house on fire, and that house is now burnt to the ground and he's out of the side. So it's just a funny little side note. We talk a lot about mid-prices throughout the pre-season, and gee, this guy could jump up, this guy could... But so rarely does it happen that a guy really jumps into the elite consistently for a whole year. More so in the midfield they do that. I guess defenders and forwards, it's hard to pick. But off on a little tangent there. So I think keep Hall for the reasons I'm about to talk about and the reasons I just did. The ones I'm about to talk about are the fact that there's some guys that are really ripe for the picking as far as premium goes, and some players that I really think you should get into the side. Hence, don't bother about sideways trading Hall, because I think it just wastes. Now, guys, you need to get in. Sam Collins, as I said, bring him in. Looks cemented in that Freo side already. Scored 100 on the weekend for his second game. He'll get plenty of price rises out of that. He's set to go up quite nicely. He's at 117,000 in your back line. Has Marcus Adams peaked? Probably not, but I think has McDonald Tipping Woody peaked? He's out of the side? Potentially. I think one of those two, you just go, thanks, boys. You've been good. You're still going good. I like what you're producing. I'm not hating on you, but it's time to go. You've made me some good coin. There's a bloke waiting at 117k. I'm going to bring him. Thanks, boys. Catch you later. That's all you got to do. It's not saying that Marcus Adams is in poor form or not a good pick. I think he's still a relevant D6 at the moment, and I'm not necessarily going to be trading him out myself, but I think it's an option, because when you have the ability to trade down and get like 250,000 from one trade, and then the ability to, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head aside from my own side, but Corey Ellis or a Josh Smith to upgrade, go bang to a real premium. You might need a little bit of cash in the bank already. Most people will, but to a Selwood, a Parker, a Rockcliffe. So that's very worth noting for sure, because I think, as I'm about to say, guys, mainly midfielders that I think are good buys, and you should be looking to bring them in if you haven't already. Dangerfield, Parker, Selwood, Ablett, Robbie Gray, Rance and Martin and Deledio. Of course, those last three in differing positions, but I think also relevant. They're not cheap as chips by any means. Now, you may have mentioned or seen that I just left out Tom Rockcliffe. Now, I'll discuss a few players and him as well in a sec, but I think all those guys are at good prices. Parker may drop again. He'll drop to around 500,000. Selwood, he's bottomed out after that 150. Really should consider. Ablett's still nicely priced. Should go up quite a bit. Robbie Gray, teetering, but I think he's a really good buy around that 500 mark. And Dangerfield is at his lowest price for the season. Still in the 600 mark, but low 600s. I think his break-even is about 111. He may drop, but as we know what Danger will do, he's more than likely to go up. So if you can get him in, I think you should. Now look, Tommy Rockcliffe. I want to talk about, I know my conundrum at the moment is I probably want to bring in two of Selwood, Parker and Rockcliffe. And I think you should probably do the same. I mean, it all is dependent on who's in your side already, but I think two of those three should definitely come in your side at some point. And at the moment, I'm leaning towards Selwood and Parker. Now, we know Rockcliffe can score well. We know that. He scored 204 on the weekend. But we also know that his body has continually let him down. Now, I'll definitely argue the case. Some of that has been luck, impact injuries that are out of his hands. But of late, we've seen those hamstring injuries come up again and again and again. I just don't, at this time of year, the last thing you want to do is take a risk on a premium and see him go down again, because there's nothing. That's an absolute wasted trade. If we were dealt Rockcliffe at this price at the start of the season, I would say get on him right now. The risk versus reward, it could potentially, just be fantastic for you. But at this point in time, we're looking to bring him in. Some people may have already had him in their sides at some stage this season, and there's potential that he could be out once again, and he's got a track record of this. And I think when you're comparing, and we're not short of good players and good midfielders at a good price. I've just listed a stack. Now, I think if I'm looking at Selwood and Parker, bear in mind, Selwood probably might get rested for a week later in the year, particularly if Geelong keep going well. So that's worth noting. But, we know Rockcliffe has some serious injury worries and concerns, and it's a real pattern now. I could say and wouldn't be surprised if he averages 115 from here on out. But equally, I wouldn't be surprised if his hammy or some other injury pops up, because unfortunately, you'd be smashing your head against a wall if you brought in Rockcliffe and you went 130, 140, 100, and then he's out for 3 more weeks. When you could go, Rockcliffe high ceiling, but also high risk, I feel now. As I said, that's not to say he's not a good pick, but you got to play the percentages at this stage, and perhaps when you got 3 premiums lined up against the wall, they're top 10 mids in the game, fantastic players, all averaging great numbers. Surely you lean towards the 2 more durable ones. Does that make logical sense? I feel it does. But you make up your own mind. That's simply my opinion, and I'll be looking to probably bring in Selwood or Dangerfield this week. Parker's probably still to drop a little bit. But, as I mentioned, guys on the bubble and people to look at, Tom Lee. Bear in mind, St Kilda have a few injuries and guys out, so, he's been in and out of the side, but not the worst pick in the world. But look at the injury lists. Look who's going to come back in as well and make a good thought process about that side of things, because it's important. Jared Jansen, Jack Trengove, 2 guys that we'll obviously look at next week, and I think could be pretty good picks, but I'll talk about them more next week. And of course, if you don't have Sam Collins already, he's the obvious one to trade down to. And as far as captaincies and VC, I think Dangerfield or Goldstein. I know Goldie is a bit of a concern over his fitness, but if he's named and you don't have Dangerfield, well, whack the VC on him, or Robbie Gray or something like that, because the Swans, maybe Pritis as well, something like that. The Swans play on the Sunday, the 3rd last game, I think, so a lot of people might have that 0 of Aaron Hall, because a lot of sides and a lot of good sides will probably have 29 out of 30, if not 30 players playing. So, you definitely Mason Cox is still playing, so we can't use his 0 that potentially we once thought we could. So yeah, that's something to consider. Probably Dangerfield into an Ablett or a Parker or a Hanbury, something like that. But we all know the captaincy. It's pretty straightforward. Take a bit of a gamble on the VC, and Bob's your uncle. It should be no dramas really. From week to week, we've got enough premiums to work with our side at the moment. So that's a bit of a wrap up for this week. All the best for the weekend. A few interesting topics to talk about this week, that's for sure. And, it does come to this time of year, and we're thinking about the buys. We're thinking about, it's a time of year where you're just wishing you had 4 trades to work with during the week, because you'd love to trade him down. You'd love to get him in. He's at a good price. Upgrade to him. But unfortunately, we're limited to 2 a week. So it can be frustrating, and you can find yourself just grappling to, give me another price rise, give me another week, just stay there sort of thing. I'm praying he scores 105, not 150, so he's at that same price. You can play with your mind, but keep it simple, try and get in the players that are at a great price and trade them out when they're at their best price. If a guy you trade out scores 110, but it's the right move, just bite the bullet and stick with your guns. We can only sit here on a Friday, assess everything, be sure on our decision. And, if we get it slightly wrong, that's just unlucky. If we do the due diligence and research, 9 times out of 10, I think smart super coaches are going to get it right. So hopefully that's what we've been doing for the most part of the season. It's brought us to a decent stage of the year so far. So I've babbled on enough. Hopefully some of what I've said has helped you. All the best for the weekend. I'll be back for the press conference over the Monday. Actually, it'll be the Tuesday, of course, because there's a Monday game. My bad. But I'll catch you guys then. Good super coaching. Chat later.